Joining us now is Andrew Gillum, CNN political commentator, former mayor of Tallahassee. Bakari Sellers, a CNN political commentator who has endorsed Kamala Harris for president. April Ryan, White House correspondent for American Urban Radio Networks, and Angela Rye, CNN political commentator and former executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus. Let's start with the economy, because as I said, the White House is entitled to optimism. If they want to look out and say, we don't see a recession coming, we think everything is good, they're entitled to that opinion. What they're not entitled to is their own facts. So when Peter Navarro, and he was here with you on Friday saying the same thing, when he was with Jake yesterday, and Jake asked him about the evidence that U.S. farmers are being hurt, that manufacturers are being hurt, the people in the United States are being hit by the tariffs. Listen to what he said.
The tariffs are hurting China. China's bearing the entire burden of the tariffs.
That's not
in terms of consumer. Hang on.
What a lot of experts say.
This is what this expert says.
In other words, I'm keeping my eyes shut here. Black is white, night is day, and water is not wet. You can make the case, Bakari, that it's worth it, that the tariffs are worth it to reach a certain goal. However, what you can't argue is that they are not hitting the American people, because they are.
Well, that's true, and I think first and foremost, when you look at farmers, not only throughout South Carolina, where I am and where I'm from, and you hear that they're screaming from pain from these tariffs day in and day out, but through the Midwest, where Donald Trump was extremely strong, you had a lot of Democratic candidates in Iowa going through the state, and what they heard from farmers were that these tariffs are killing us. You have soybeans that are just being stored for weeks and days and not being able to move. So I think what Peter Navarro is doing is a disservice, and by all economic indicators. I mean, whether or not you look at the fact that the last 30 months of the Obama administration versus the first 30 months of the Trump administration, there was a $1 million difference, a million job difference in the amount of jobs that were created. Or whether or not you look at the indicators that are showing that our economy is simply slowing down, the huge sell-off we had last week, this Trump economy is not working. And last but not least, Barack Obama turned over a deficit that was about $600 billion to Donald Trump. It's now $1.1 trillion because his tax scams simply has not worked. And when you look at everything that's going on right now, the American economy is going to kind of slow, not to a stop, but slow down. And that's not good for a Trump reelection in the least bit. And
Angela, by the way, when we talk about the farmers, they are getting a cushion of federal assistance to the tune of something like $25 billion, which of course is great for farmers and their families, and we understand why it's needed. But Republicans used to call that a bailout. You know, when President Obama did things to help, say, the car industry or whatever, it used to be called a bailout. And of course, we no longer talk about the deficit, but that has spiked. And so we just need to be, you know, sort of clear-eyed about what the tariffs, even if farmers say that it isn't hurting them, it's certainly affecting the economy.
Yeah, I think that the main issue I have with Donald Trump's administration is the same issue I had with the Trump campaign, and that is they are immune to facts until those facts support the case they're trying to make. So, for example, in the same interview with Jake Tapper, Navarro says, well, you know, what was it? It was all of the stats that Jake pulled. He had reasons why you shouldn't believe it. He said, let's just do the math here. And it's like, no, let's also look at the data. Data never works for them. Remember when Donald Trump said that the Bureau of Labor Statistics had fake information until it was beneficial to him? I think the other challenge I have is I would love to know what economists he's talking to, because most of them will tell you, whether you're running from the recession or you're trying to pretend like the tariffs are not impacting the American economy, to the tune of 95%, they're hitting us more 95% to China's 5%. I would love to know who they are speaking to, because they are not experts. They are gaslight artists.
Well, it's Larry Kudlow, Peter Navarro. I mean, that's the team that says that everything looks rosy at the moment.
Yes. April, you've covered this White House for a long time. Are they equipped? Because there's this discussion out there, and Catherine Rampello, we're going to speak to in a little bit, makes the case they're not equipped to handle a downturn yet. Do you get the sense that it's something that's even entered their mind?
you know, as a man thinketh, so is he. You know, the grassroots American feels that something's not right in their pocket. This administration can say, oh, the economic indicators don't line up. But let me say this, when it comes to the tariffs with the soybean farmers, the subsidies have been slow to get to them. They are hurting. When it comes to the tariffs in China with the clothing manufacturers, leather goods, it's hurting people who are selling leather goods and the clothiers. American designers are feeling the hit. Let's go to the Mexican tariffs. The domestic auto industry is being hit. They're laying off. They're absorbing the impact of those tariffs. When they make a product in Mexico, well, when they make a product here and send it to Mexico, the tariffs are added, and that translates to an extra cost to the consumer. And there's just, you know, there's just so much more going on, you know. And then a big indicator is the trucking industry. When the trucking industry slows down, when they're not moving goods, that is a big indicator. Those are the grassroots indicators. When they go in their pocket and pull out lint and they don't have money to show for it, that's saying my pocket is depressed, suppressed, and repressed.
Andrew, I want to move on to the topic of Greenland. Last week, I think we were sort of making light about this proposal, but it turns out that this is a serious consideration, it sounds like, from President Trump at least, despite what Denmark says and what Greenland says about it. So here's what President Trump said over the weekend about his interest.
Well, Greenland, I don't know, it got released somehow. It's just something we talked about. Denmark essentially owns it. We're very good allies with Denmark. We protect Denmark like we protect large portions of the world. So the concept came up, and I said, certainly I'd be, strategically it's interesting. I mean, essentially it's a large real estate deal. A lot of things could be done.
Andrew, your thoughts?
Well, first of all of us ought to be terrified anytime we hear Donald Trump talking about a large real estate deal. We don't have to go too far back in his own history with real estate deals to know that this man goes bust every time, every deal he's associated with. And now, unfortunately, all of us are inextricably tied to him because he's serving in the highest office in all the land. I'm just going to agree with the Prime Minister here. This is a ludicrous idea. What the president ought to be concerned about is the territory that is already under his control. He likes to bring up Baltimore, Maryland all the time. Where is his aid package to Baltimore, Maryland? Where's his jobs program for the folks who live there, breathe there, try to raise their families there? Maybe we could go a step further and talk about Puerto Rico. Where was the president when we needed him in Puerto Rico to help that community get back on its feet? Instead of tossing out toilet paper and paper towels, the president should have put together a comprehensive package. Instead, he treated it like some kind of a, I don't know, a charade of some sort. And then just real quick, Allison, I just wanted to mention, because I don't think any one of us on this panel are championing or cheering for the economy of the United States to go down. Not one of us. Because the truth is that when this economy slips, it's everyday working people who are impacted. Our issue, and I'll speak for myself here, my issue is this president has taken credit from day one for all of the hard work done by President Barack Obama. And now that his policies, his economic policies are beginning to show impact, he doesn't like it. He's the one that started this tariff war. He's the one that gave away the top a tax break to the top 1% of Americans, the same people who are not turning that money back over. So any gain that we would have seen from the tax breaks have all diminished, and now the chickens are coming home to roost. And this president is playing the blame game. It's ridiculous, and the American people deserve better.
Hey, Bakari, I want to end on this note in this segment here, which is we're learning a lot more about the people who went to that event, the union workers who went to the event in Pennsylvania last week. It turns out that if they didn't go, they would lose money, that their overtime pay for the week was going to be tied to their attendance at this presidential event. A memo to the Shell union workers said your attendance is not mandatory. This will be considered an excused absence. However, those who are not in attendance will not receive overtime pay on Friday. So, Bakari, how are we supposed to see this if people were essentially being forced to go, else they weren't going to make the money they need to make?
I mean, first and foremost, we do acknowledge that there are a large swath of Americans that are supporters of Donald Trump. He doesn't have any problem filling rallies throughout this country. But what I will say is that is utterly depressing, that individuals who work extremely hard just to make ends meet, to provide from their families, were compelled to go to this rally, and if not, suffer hurt in their pockets. I mean, what we're talking about right now, what Angela, April, Andrew, and I are all talking about right now, and Andrew surmised it pretty correctly here, is that American workers are hurting. And this is just another example where the Trump administration is using them as a political prop, as a ploy. And we have to get away from that. For viewers to understand, a tariff is nothing more than a tax. This isn't some war that we're in with China. This is a tax on American citizens. This is a burden on American citizens, and dragging them out to a rally is just another example of that.
Okay, panel, thank you very much. We'll talk about so many more topics with you shortly. All right, let's welcome back Andrew Gillum, Bakari Sellers, April, Ryan, and Angela Rye. Angela, once again, this is a pattern that we have seen repeated over and over. There will be a horrific mass shooting or a school shooting. There's been Parkland. There's been Las Vegas. There's been what happened 2 weeks ago. The president's gut reaction via Twitter will be, we need to raise the age to buy guns. We need to ban bump stocks. We need to do expanded background checks. And then something happens over the next few days, and he changes his tune. And so everybody who thought, well, this time will be the tipping point, this time will be different because he certainly seems to want expanded background checks, now he sounds as though he's not a full supporter.
Well, and just like normal, Donald Trump is not paying attention to what the American people want. The American people overwhelmingly want background checks. It is a very small step in the right direction. And so you would think that at this point, given the fact that he has a close connection to white supremacists, given the fact that there have been far too many people who have been killed regardless of their interests, their race, their gender, their age in this country, that he would want to do something and take this in a different direction. He could have a win under his belt for finally doing the right thing, and all of a sudden he is turning a blind eye to death, to bloodshed on his watch. And I can't think of anything, as irresponsible as he is, I cannot think of anything that is more irresponsible than this, especially when this president, when he wants to do something, Allison, we know that he does not wait for Congress. He does not wait for Congress, and so he does not need to, he doesn't need to wait for them to encourage them to do the right thing. He doesn't need to do any of that. He just needs to take a step, another step, a small step in the right direction.
Can I jump in real quick? Because what
I just wanted to just...
Yeah. Go ahead, Mayor.
I'm sorry. I know there are a couple of us and we can't see each other, but you know, the truth is about this president is that he's actually not a person of his word. He says one thing one day and then does another. I mean, even when he's pretending to be bold in his actions, right? First he threatens Mexico and goes right up to the line and then says, oh, we're not going to do that. Then he threatens China with these tariffs. And then all of a sudden it's, oh, we're going to delay them so that the American people don't feel the weight of them over the holiday season. Then he got out there on guns, obviously, and said, after Parkland, to be quite frank, in my home state of Florida, we need background checks. We need red flag laws. And all of a sudden, now he's backed away. Donald Trump is weak. The emperor has no clothes on. And it's really devastating to see on this issue where there's such unanimity, such a pull, both from the left and the right, to see something happen here, to see him basically feckless for all intent and purpose.
Go ahead, Bakari.
But let me just say this real quick, because I actually think all my colleagues are wrong here to a certain extent, because I don't feel like this falls in the lap of Donald Trump. And that's going to sound a little strange to say. I think he's emblematic of a larger problem we have in the Republican Party. But back during Sandy Hook, when there were 20+ young white kids who lost their lives in a school shooting, and the United States Congress did absolutely nothing, I'm under no illusion that we're going to have any gun control or any laws change that can make it more difficult for people who do not need to have weapons to purchase them. So this has been a problem long before Donald Trump. I don't actually think this rests at his feet. I know he's the president of the United States now, but I think that lack of courage that Andrew's been talking about, that fecklessness that we're all talking about, has been a part of the Republican Party because they've been purchased by the NRA for a very long period of time. And if they didn't do anything after Sandy Hook, I'm of no belief that they're going to do anything now. And secondly, I'm about 5 miles away from Mother Emanuel AME Church this morning, right here in Charleston, South Carolina. And the Senate chair, the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Lindsey Graham, represents this area. He represents this state. And we still have the Charleston loophole whereby Dylan Roof was able to walk in, and because his background checks were not completed in the amount of time period by the FBI, he was able to purchase that weapon, go in and kill 9 people at a Bible study. And if the chair of the Judiciary Committee represents this area and he still will not do anything, I'm of no belief any of them will. So while we want to beat up on Donald Trump a lot, let me just say that his cowardice is not his alone. The NRA has bought and purchased the entire Republican Party, and that's where we are now.
There's a difference.
April.
But let me give you a little bit of insight. Let me give you a little bit of insight as to what's going on. As you see, polls are showing right now that nationally the majority of people want something done, and it takes people. We keep forgetting we the people are still forming a more perfect union, no matter how great this president says this country is. The bottom line is that now the president is in a catch-22. Sources very close to the president and this situation are saying he's had a conversation with the NRA saying we may not be able to hold off on this one. You've got the American public crying out, you know, just like you said, Bakari, about Dylan Roof. We're still dealing with the Dylan Roof issue with Mother Emanuel. We're still reeling from that. We're still reeling from the bump stock issue in Vegas. We're still reeling from Sandy Hook. We're still reeling from El Paso. We're still reeling from Dayton. We're still reeling from other places. But at issue is people have to stand up. We have seen John Legend cry with a victim's son, a 7-year-old son. We've seen him sing. We've seen the American public come out. It takes the American people to change this president's mind. And as long as the pressure keeps coming, H.R. 8 could be a possibility. It's passed in the House, but where's the Senate? Where are the Senate Republicans?
Wait a minute.
But
hold on, Bakari, really quick. I just have to say this. Wait, I need to refute your last point. Go ahead. The issue is not that we're saying that this country hasn't gone far enough, hasn't been trying to hold politicians accountable, hasn't been trying to dismantle, clearly, the NRA for all of their wrongs and their abuses. The issue is this president's rhetoric is what is the problem. We saw Barack Obama cry on camera and say, what is it going to take? He was trying to help Congress move. It is Donald Trump who will say one thing and then do another, who will say one thing and then commit to something completely different behind closed doors. That is the problem. It's not that, of course, we understand the Republicans have been irresponsible. Democrats haven't been responsible enough either. But the issue is this president's rhetoric. It is dangerous. We see that with the 2 white supremacist shootings. This president's rhetoric is dangerous because it's irresponsible and he's not taking leadership of this.
But I don't disagree with any of that. His rhetoric is irresponsible. I don't disagree with that. However, what I'm saying is that this entire United States Congress, I know we passed H.R. 8, but for decades, I mean, since Democrats got destroyed in those United States House races after we had the assault weapons banned and they blamed it on that, Democrats lost the backbone to fight for gun control. And all I'm saying is that we're at a point now where, and I understand April's point about we the people having to do this, but my retort would be simply how many more people have to die? And so we have a lot of bloodshed at this point where every single week we're numb to the fact that more people are dying. And I personally am exhausted, and I simply don't believe that anything will change. Prove me wrong. But I just don't believe it will.
But I mean, I also think that the point is, Bakari, probably to your point, is that the president holds a lot of sway with Senators Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell. Right. The president has a lot of power over them. So if he made his wishes known, they would probably respond.
And that's why this is a marker this morning. That's why the fact that he came out. That's why the fact that he came out, Mayor, and said this weekend is a big deal. He happened to utter it under his breath. Right. But had he come out firmly on that tarmac and said, "I'm going to push for background checks," that's a much different deal. Than he
You'll have a lot more opportunity to tell us your positions, Mayor, and everyone at 8 o'clock. We'll see you guys then.
Yeah, indeed. See you then.
Thank you very much.
Now to discuss, Andrew Gillum, CNN political commentator, the former mayor of Tallahassee, and 2018 Democratic nominee for governor of Florida. Bakari Sellers, CNN commentator and a former Democratic member of the South Carolina House. He supports Senator Kamala Harris for president. April Ryan, CNN political analyst and White House correspondent for American Urban Radio Networks. And Angela Rye, CNN political commentator and former executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus. I'm just an anchor at CNN. I have one simple line there. I don't know. Those are some lofty titles there. I think the significance here is that any Republican you talk to inside the Senate says that if there's going to be movement on expanding background checks, the president is going to have to lead the way. The president is going to have to be the one to push it along. Mitch McConnell's people have said that. That seems to be the notion. So, Mayor Gillum, when you have the president of the United States just 10 days after calling for meaningful background checks and saying that is something he wanted, all of a sudden saying, yeah, you know, we have strong background checks already, it seems to me that whatever steel might have been in his spine before on background checks is gone now again.
You know, John Allison, the truth is that this president simply cannot be trusted. His word is not his bond, and it's not just on this issue. You can scour the issues over his presidency where he began one day with one tweet or one comment, and it ends the day in the complete opposite direction. And really, it is disappointing because Democrats, Republicans, Independents, there is bipartisan support all around the country for the Congress and the president to do something. This is a moment for him to demonstrate leadership. Yet that is a term, that is a characteristic that continues to elude this president. He's showy. He likes to, you know, put stuff in the atmosphere to distract us. But when it comes to actually, you know, biting the bullet, excuse the pun, he backs away. He retracts. He surrenders. What this tells me is, certainly on this issue, is that Donald Trump is a wholly owned subsidiary of the NRA. He's terrified of them. He's running a base campaign. And I think on this issue will continue to shrink from leadership and moral leadership and clarity that's required at this moment, as many Americans are concerned for themselves, their families, their neighborhoods, their schools, their churches, their synagogues, and our president waits.
Angela, here's just a few poll numbers to put up so people see where Americans are on these. 89% of Americans, Republicans, Democrats, support expanding background checks. Red flag laws that get guns out of the hands of the most dangerous people, 76%. Voluntary gun buyback, 75%. Ban sale of assault weapons, 62%. So, will anything change right now as you see it?
Right, and I think that this is really the question. We have a president who, as Andrew just said, has zero credibility. He has questioned polls and the legitimacy of them when, again, they're not in his favor. And I think that the question really is on all of us. What are we going to do to demonstrate leadership? Because we know that he's not able to demonstrate leadership. What are we going to do to ensure that members of Congress who are elected to serve the public, regardless of whether those members in their communities, in their districts, or in their states voted for them, they have an obligation to serve the public. What we know right now is that the gun rights are conflicting with human rights, the right to live. So for all of the people out there, especially on the conservative side of the aisle, that say they are pro-life, you should be pro-life when it comes to gun killings as well. So where are you? Where are you when it's time to stand out for the right to live, when people are being killed, when kids, Andrew just talked about his kids and the kinds of conversations he's going to have with his children now that they've started school. Do we really want those conversations being had with preschoolers and kindergartners? That is unreasonable. It is irresponsible, and it is incumbent upon the people, the American people, to do something about this when the president won't act.
Bakari?
Yeah, I'm depressed. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. As an age-old civil rights adage, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Look, I mean, I don't believe anything's going to happen, and I'm sorry for being so jaded, but I'm jaded by reality. I mean, you have people gunned down at a concert. You have people gunned down in an elementary school. You have people gunned down in a church. Nothing has changed in this country because people are afraid to go up against a lobby. And we can say now, I mean, your question, John, was damning, and it didn't do anything for my depression this morning, because now you're asking me to ask the President of the United States to be a leader, something he's been incapable of doing his entire life. And so now if that is what I have to depend on, then my depression, it exacerbates because I can't have any faith in him. So if it's incumbent upon me to do something, I mean, we've already had enough bloodshed, but I would look in the camera and simply ask Lindsey Graham to have the fortitude necessary to go out and implement some change as a South Carolinian. We have the Parkland kids, we have Moms Demand Action, we have all of these individuals fighting for everything they believe in, but we have cowards that we've elected to places of government, and that has to change. I don't believe anything will, So stop messing with my depression this morning, John.
That is doubly depressing. April, you covered the White House day in and day out. Why does the president, I mean, the president who leads from his gut, who tweets immediately that he thinks that background checks should be expanded, that, you know, I mean, I could just go down the list, that the age minimum should be raised for gun purchases, that bump stocks should be banned. I mean, right after these, that's his first instinct, is that something has to change. Why does he backtrack like this?
You know why he backtracks? Because the American public is not pushing hard enough. And I hate to do that and say that, but it's the truth. When you saw what happened at Parkland and when you saw what happened in Vegas with the bump stocks, he did the bump stock. We got a ban on bump stocks. But then when it came to Parkland, he held a town hall meeting. These kids forced the nation to look in the mirror. And he said he was so taken by the honesty, the sheer pain and the hurt and the tears in that room in the White House that he said, you know, I'm going to look into this. But what was it? The first obstacle, the NRA. The NRA said, whoa, hold your horses. And he had to at that moment. But there is more of an outcry now. So it depends. And I've heard from my sources, you know, who are in the inner circle who said, look, the president just told the NRA, we may not be able to hold off much longer. But here's another reason why, if it does not move, it's because this is an election year. You know, you have Mitch McConnell, who's not willing to move, excuse me, move on this, who is in a battle to save his seat, his political career. So this is about politics. It's about winning an election in certain states that believe in the Second Amendment and also the NRA. But the will of the people, that moral clarity from the American public, if they push hard enough, if they push long enough, hard enough, consistently and persistently, things could change. We've seen it over the past.
I don't think any of us, by the way, April, disagree with the Second Amendment, right? All of us, none of us are trying to change the language of the Constitution. Right. We're simply saying that in Ohio, in a matter of 30 seconds, you had a weapon that could basically level, you know, quite frankly, hundreds of people. In this case, we were fortunate in some instances that there weren't more bodies laying in the street here, but you have individuals who have weapons of war, weapons that quite frankly, have artillery that outflanks that of the law enforcement agencies that charge with protecting us. Listen, folks, this is, we do have to do something. I'm extremely proud of Moms Demand Action. I'm extremely proud of the young people from Parkland. And I will tell you one distinct difference that happened in Florida following what happened at Sandy Hook that didn't happen here in the nation is that the legislative session happened to be in when that very tragic event took place. And so our representatives weren't able to escape the reality that they were in position right there, right in that moment, to take a vote and to change some things. Now, we didn't get as much as we wanted, but we do have red flag laws now, right? We did address the age limit to be able to access high-capacity weapons, but we got to do more. The worst thing we could have done was let Mitch McConnell get away with not calling back the United States Senate and the Congress to deal with these issues immediately.
All right, I'm going to shift gears, if I can, right now.
And Andrew, really quick,
Angela's got to be super quick because I want to get to this next subject, but go ahead.
Really, really quick, I just want to say this because I think as Black folks sitting on this air, we also don't want to ignore the folks in our communities every day who are working hard against gun violence when it doesn't rise to the level of a mass shooting, but those Black lives matter too. I just want to commend those folks for not giving up, and hopefully they all can help Bakari in aiding that depression because we got work to do.
I want to talk about social justice, and I want to talk about sports, if I can, because Jay-Z and his company has struck a deal with the NFL, an entertainment deal. And in the process of doing this, has sort of talked about where he sees the movement for social justice right now and where it's going. And he also spoke about Colin Kaepernick. Let's listen to what Jay-Z said.
You go outside and you protest, and then the company or the individual say, I hear you. What do we do next? I think we've passed kneeling. I think it's time to go into actionable items.
We're past kneeling, he says. Well, Colin Kaepernick, as you can imagine, has something to say about that. On Instagram, he says, my brothers, Eric Reed, Kenny Stills, and Albert Wilson, who are all athletes who are continuing to protest along with Colin Kaepernick, continue to fight for the people, even in the face of death threats. They have never moved past the people and continue to put their beliefs into action. Stay strong, brothers. Are there two sides to this? Is there a team Jay-Z and a team Colin Kaepernick on this issue, Angela?
Well, let me first just say this. This is a really tricky, sore subject. And first, he sure did. I'm ready, and I'm ready. The issue is plain and simple. The issue is that Jay-Z talked about kneeling, but there was also some additional context in that press conference they called. People should continue to kneel. People should continue to protest. Why? Because the issue was police brutality, and black folks and brown folks and other folks are continuing to be gunned down and beat down by law enforcement all over this country. So no, the protest does not end. Additionally, I would say to Colin, I hope that you will figure out a way to work with Jay-Z on this. I'm not talking about striking a deal with the NFL, but if now the second part of the protest is that you still don't have a job, let's figure out how you get that job, right? And I don't think that it's either or. I would love to see Jay-Z say, yo, I want to work with the NFL, but this deal is coming to a screeching halt if Colin can't get signed. And I think that's reasonable. That's a win for the culture. I have a lot more to say about this, but it's probably a book. I'll defer to the squad.
All right, that's a good tease. Bakari, which side are you on, Jay-Z or Kaepernick, if it breaks that way?
I don't think it's a side issue, but I will say that with all due respect to Sean Carter, Jay-Z, I think he was wrong in his comment, because kneeling is an action item. I think protesting, sitting, marching, sometimes those things we do in silence, that civil disobedience, those are action items. But I don't think that this is a one side or other. I think we're all on the same side of this coin. I think that we're all protesting in our own ways. And yes, I think movements do evolve. Jay-Z and Diamonds Are Forever, he said it best. He said, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. And so he's taking what he knows, that knowledge he knows about business, and trying to bring forth. Diamonds Are Forever, by the way, is a great song. I hope John and Allison bump it as we leave the segment. But he's taking what he knows. He's taking what he knows as a businessman and trying to move social justice forward. I'm going to be patient with Jay, because Jay has bailed out protesters. He's sent kids to college.
Yes,
I mean, he deserves our patience and our respect as we see how this evolves. But I will say that Colin Kaepernick gave up everything that he had for something he believed in. He will always be a hero in the same vein that we talk about Muhammad Ali.
Mayor?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, I agree with both my colleagues here.
Andrew
and
was
I don't
trying to
think
hide.
it is.
Andrew was like, don't call on me, don't call on me.
No, listen, no. The truth is, so I will tell you, I was disappointed when I heard that we're past kneeling, right? And I think we should all reject that. We're not past kneeling. Innocent people, particularly black and brown people, continue to die in the streets unwarranted. We're not beyond that point. I was disappointed that a conversation didn't take place between Mr. Kaepernick and obviously Jay-Z before this thing was struck. Now, I'm not going to pity Colin Kaepernick for not having a job, and I don't think he would want us to pity him in that way. This movement wasn't about that. It is about the injustice that continues to be pervasive in our society. That being said, Jay-Z is not new to this. I think about the work that he's done for the Trayvon Martin Foundation here, for Sabrina Fulton, and for Tracy down here in Florida. He's conscious about these issues, and I'm hopeful, and I'm going to watch it as well, that there's a bigger plan at play here, because we're not dealing with a dummy. It's a smart man. He's a business man, but he also is someone who is conscious and I think aware of the environment that we find ourselves in. I think we'll do something to move the ball forward here.
All right, friends, Diamonds Are Forever, and of course, all you are as well. Forever. Thank you for being here.
I know we owe you
You're first
one,
up
April.
next time. You're first
April's
up.
like,
Take it
what
up with
about
the
me? I
executive
know
producer.
April not letting you
Wait a
go,
minute,
John.
wait a minute. No, wait a minute. I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this. I'm for the culture. 400 years since we Africans were brought into this nation. I'm for Jay-Z making change on the inside and Colin Kaepernick getting a job back in the NFL, and for people to still stand up for what's right. 400 years ago, Africans were dealt with policing from 400 years ago to today. It is still an issue. Jay-Z is wrong there, but he needs to do the work from the inside out.
April, you did it in under 10 seconds. You got your message out. You delivered.
Diamonds
that
are
was
forever,
excellent.
like I always say.
Guys, thank you so
Diamonds are forever.
much. All right, moving on.